Hi everybody, it's Kimberly here, guest designing again for Kat Scrappiness. And today, these are the products that I'm using for my Christmas card. And I'm featuring, my feature product is this Believe Brush Script die. And I'm using this Hero Arts color layering snowy tree die and the Echo Park snowfall stencil and Kat Scrappiness double rectangle dies. So I'm going to be using a standard size A2 card today that's top folding. And my blue panel here measures 3 3/4 and 5 1/8. And my frame is 4 by 5 1/4. So I'm going to start with my blue panel here. And instead of stamping the snowbank, I decided to create a template with some masking tape. And then I drew it on the back of some pretty glitter paper and I cut that out. So I'm going to create a foundation line here. So I'm using my frame template that I made. I always like to make templates so it helps me during my card making. So I'm going to get that centered there and lay this snowbank down, figure out where I want it, just a little bit lower than I'm going to have it at the when I'm done with my card. And I'm going to use a pencil to lightly mark where that snowbank is going to be. And so first I'm going to do stamping with a solid tree from the Hero Arts color layering snowy tree. And this did take some practice for me, and I would suggest some kind of stamping tool like a stamp press, or here I'm using a stamp positioning tool. And it did help me quite a bit. So I'm going to get this solid stamp into place where I want it. I want it kind of offset to the left. Trying to make up my mind here. So I'm getting my tool in place. And for the solid layer, you want to make sure that you use a light green color here. And I'm using some dye ink. And it went well with this light blue cardstock. And so I'm going to do that a couple of times so I get a good layer. Okay, so I'm happy with that. The next layer is going to be the outline of the tree, and I'll be showing that here once I get everything cleaned up. And here's the outline. And for this, you want to use a dark green because it's going to kind of make that whole tree pop and give it some more dimension and depth. So for this to help me, I'm using a black ink so I can see where my outline is going to be. It's just something I learned. So I wasn't happy with that first one, so I'm going to do it again. There we go. And I did tape my panel down to my mat so it wouldn't shift around. So my head's going to get in the way and I apologize, but I want to make sure I have that good and lined up. And I do. So now I'm going to ink up my outline with my dark green ink. Again, this is some dye ink that I have. You can use anything that you have. I think a stamp press would be ideal for this. And I know Kat has some of those new stamp presses in her store. It's on my list. So I'm going to zoom in here and you can really see the detail, how it really transformed that solid tree. So I had to set that aside and let it dry because I was using a dye ink. So right here I'm checking to make sure my embossing powder is not going to stick, because the next layer is going to make it look like there's a snowfall on the tree, and that's this layer. And I'm going to use the same process. I'm going to use my embossing tool, make sure, or anti-static tool, because it's very dry right now where I live. And so I'm going to just ink that up with some black ink so I can have a good impression. I'm using Memento black ink. And so again, I'm going to stand up and make sure I have this lined up where I want it. This was really fun card to make. I liked all the layering. So next I'm going to use some Versamark ink. This is a nice sticky ink for your embossing powder. And I'm using, it's like a snow puff embossing powder. So it's a little bit heavier grain. So I wanted to make sure I had enough ink on my stamp. So I had success. And she does have some of this, I believe it's a Wow White Puff embossing powder in her store. So I'm going to heat set this with my heat tool. The heavier grain does take a little bit more time, so just make sure you keep your heat tool moving around. I did have just a little bit of warping, but not bad. So next I'm going to put down this deer, and I just think they go so well together. And as you can see, I've already been practicing with some ink. And I'm just going to do him in a nice brown ink. And that frame template, I can't stress enough how helpful that is to make those templates with your dies. And we'll get him stamped down. And next I'm going to use the Echo Park Snowfall stencil. And I'm going to use some white pigment ink to do some embossing. So I'm just going all over my panel. I'm kind of avoiding the deer because he might be just a little wet. So I'm going to get that stencil taped down, and then I'm just using that little tool. And I'm just going to go around my images there. I'm all done with that. Blending tool, that's what it is. I knew what it was. So again, I'm going to use that white puffy snow looking embossing powder. It just gives a lot of nice texture to the card. And I'm brushing any of the extra off. And again, going to heat set this with my heat tool. And I just use a Swiffer to wipe off that extra anti-static powder that I used. Now I'm going to add my glittery snowbank, and I'm going to use some Ranger Multi-Matte Medium adhesive. This is one of my favorite adhesives. Again, checking that template. So I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to adhere this panel to my card. And I'm going to get that centered along with my grid mat. Okay, I'm finally happy with the positioning. So I'm going to use my ATG gun to adhere this down. It's a nice strong adhesive. I would have used liquid glue, but my panel was just a little warped, and this will help keep it flattened. All right, now I'm going to add my frame, and I created this frame with the double stitch rectangle dies from Kat Scrappiness. I used the largest and third from largest, and I put those together with some washi tape and ran them through my die cutting machine, and it made this really nice frame. And I added some foam tape to this so it would give it some dimension. Looks like a little picture. And then I am going to add one more element, this beautiful Believed brush script die. And I used some gold paper with that and used some adhesive to give it some dimension. I think this would make a very nice masculine card or more contemporary card with the colors. You could put a gift card inside. So I'm happy with that. So the tree I felt needed to be brightened up a little bit because of all the anti-static powder kind of dulled it a little. So I took my Wink of Stella, it's clear, and I just ran it over the entire tree, even the embossing, and it did just fine. And so that's it. You can't really see the glitter, but it's there. Well, I hope you have a Merry Christmas, and it's been my pleasure to be a guest designer for Kat Scrappiness. Bye-bye.